I think it's safe to say that all of us would love to be experts in following Jesus. That's what I strive for. I want to get better at being like Jesus. I'd like to be an expert follower of Jesus. And in order to become an expert follower of Jesus, I need more experience. And the way to get experience is to conduct by action, experiments. These words are all related. For you to become an expert at anything, you need to have lots of experience, and the only way to get that experience is through experimenting. And let me just talk briefly about a basic approach to experimentation. You have a question or a hypothesis, you take an action, you gather data, you interpret the data, and you draw conclusions. In fact, if we go back to what Tyler had written out before about Elder Bednar's message, that was a pathway for experimentation. You have an assurance, you take an action, it gives you evidence, which allows you to have more assurance. That is experimentation. In fact, this is what we teach at universities and schools is, people call it the scientific approach. Well, it's not just scientists that do it, it's anybody living who wants to learn something. You go out and try something and figure out what you've learned. Now you've noticed that I've capitalized a couple of words here. The root word that connects all these, or the baseline word, is this word per. Now, I probably should have done this videos ago, but if you want to look up the origin of words in English, there's a great online dictionary that I use, and I'll write it up here for you. So you go here, you can type in any word in English, and likely you'll find a list of references of where the word comes from. And what I want to point out here is the word per. Now this word, its root meaning, and it's actually the foundation for actually hundreds and hundreds of words in our language, literally means to try, to risk, to attempt, or to press forward. So imagine this, if you want to become an expert follower of Jesus, you got to go try something. You're going to have to risk being a bit uncomfortable. You actually even have to risk the possibility of failure. And actually the great thing is, the atonement has already provided the safety net if in our risk we happen to have a failure. Failure is simply data that allows us to act better the next time. So instead of having fear about failure, we should embrace the trial, embrace the risk, go out and attempt, and we should press forward. Make sure I get that spelled properly. Press forward in faith. And this is what the plan of salvation invites us to do. Now let me share with you some other words that will show up in these chapters that you might want to look at that have at their foundation this core idea of attempting, trying, pressing forward. I've written down all the words in Alma 32 to 34, actually I haven't looked at Alma 35 yet, that actually use a variation of this ancient word per. And I'm not going to go through them all, but I want you to just look at this list. And I want you to notice that one of the core emphases that Alma's driving at is our need in the gospel to act, to try, to attempt, to become experts by experimentation. And just look at all these words: preaching, permitted, preparation, perfect, precious, profit, perish, prosper, prepare, perform, prove, and procrastinate all actually come from this core basic word. Now, let me share a few other words that might help you to sink this a little deeper into your heart, why experimenting on the Word of God matters. Here's some other words you may not realize come from the same root word. Pride. I'm putting in capital letters the letters that are related to this. And this one I find particularly significant. I mean, the reason pride's there is because sometimes you get out in front and you think you're better than everybody else. So this one I think is super important. The word fear also is based on this. Why? We're afraid of trying things. We're afraid of risk. We're afraid of tempting. We're afraid of pressing forward because we might fail. And in order to become an expert follower of Jesus, we have to embrace the fear of the possibility of failure. This is back to what Tyler was saying. We have the circle of light, and we have to step out into the darkness. We've all done it. We all know how that feels. And the only way to progress is to continuously press forward in faith. And again, the atonement is what makes all of this possible. That we don't really have to fear failure, because in Jesus, if we choose to be with him, we're already perfect. He's already arrived, and he's just asked us to be with him. So we encourage you to set aside fear by action, by planting that seed. And this is exactly what the Zoramites were dealing with, these poor Zoramites. They actually had fear, like, what can we actually get out of life? What's available for us? And they had enough faith to ask the question, and they had enough desire to believe that that planted the seed in their hearts that eventually they found an inheritance with God.